You worked hard, but you were also lucky. Got that without a doubt.
Yeah.
That buying opportunity from, let's call it '07 to 2011 or 2012. Do you think something like that will ever come back again? Do you have any thoughts on where we're headed in the next few years? And I know I'm jumping ahead a bit, and we'll get back to your story, but I just thought,
Sure. I'll break that question down. So first, do I think it'll happen again? 100% yes. We'll see it again in our lifetime. And I don't know if it's going to be as severe as the Great Recession. I do not think that it's going to be something along the lines of the Great Depression. I think the likelihood of that happening is a lot less because we've learned a lot of the lessons from the Great Depression by pumping money into the economy to help prop things up, by dropping the interest rate to zero or close to it to help spurn, lending and spending and all these things. But the likelihood of another Great Recession in our lifetime, it's 100% going to happen. Not a doubt in my mind. And the reason for that is a lot of decisions made around money are made based on emotion, not based on logic. When you think about, let's say, going to the store and getting a dozen donuts, all right? That's an emotional purchase, okay? It's not a logical purchase because logically, that's going to do a lot more harm to you than it's going to do good for you. And go to that store and you eat a dozen donuts every single day, and you do that over a period of a couple of years, you're going to see some pretty bad things happen. Logically, if you exercise on a weekly basis, the benefits that it's going to have for you in the long run are great. But the thing is that most people don't do that. Most people want instant gratification. And so they want to find the easier way to do something, the easier way to make money. And so because we're drawn to this easier way of making money, you look on social media and you see people flashing, the dollars and the cars and the private jets and the mansions and all this. And it makes it look like money is really easy to make. And for the most part, it's not, unless you're doing something illegal, or you win the actual lottery, the birth lottery, the marriage lottery. Money is not easily made in this country. But people see that, and so they'll gravitate towards a fast buck, an emotional buck, over a logical dollar. And so because of that, and banks feed into that. They know that they're smarter than the people that they're lending to. They know that. But they know that they're serving their shareholders. So they know that it behooves them to continue to generate profits, so they have higher salaries, so their stock price goes up, so they continue to have a job. They don't care about the products that they're selling down to, the people that are buying them, and they know that there's a really good chance that it could drive the company to the ground. But they're hoping, maybe things will change and the economy will do this or that, and we'll be okay. But emotionally, they know that humans are going to make that decision versus the logical decision 99 times out of 100. So do I think it's going to happen again? 100% it will happen again. Regulations will get relaxed. People will take their foot, off the gas pedal and slow down a little bit. And, sadly, it'll happen again. And then your other question, you'll have to forgive me. I forgot it.
Just going back to this, do you think it'll happen again within a decade or just at some point in our lifetime?
So your other question was, what's the outlook for the next couple of years?
Yeah.
The outlook for the next couple of years, we're in a high interest rate period right now. I think that is going to continue for another 18 months, give or take. There's going to be some squeezing. It's very similar to like a boa constrictor. The boa constrictor kills its prey slowly, not fast. And that's why it's so incredibly effective. And that's what interest rates are doing right now. Finally, the virus is setting in. It's kind of like right as you're getting sick and you're getting sick, you start to get a little tired. The temperature starts to come up, but the virus really hasn't hit you yet. And that's kind of how I look at high interest rates right now. It really hasn't hit us yet, but it's finally going to start hitting us sometime next year because people will understand that's the new normal. That's the new winter that is set in, where every day when you step outside and you think it's going to be sunny and warm, it's going to be winter for a good 12-month period of time. Now, there's light at the end of the tunnel, though, because our country operates on cheap debt. That's how we make money, all around.
For the last 2 decades, would you say?
Longer than that. We operate on cheap debt. And we operate on deficits. And we've been operating on deficits since the beginning of our country. I mean, we took on a ton of debt from France just to fight Britain in the war, American Revolution. So we've been operating on debt for a very, very long period of time, and the country has done phenomenal in doing it. And we're very diversified, in our GDP, so it enables us to be able to do that. But consumer spending represents over 60% of our GDP. So if you want to keep our economy humming, you have to have consumers spending money. In order to do that, you have to have cheaper debt. And so the light at the end of the tunnel is to know that the people that sit on the Fed board that make these interest rates decisions as to whether they're going to be dovish or hawkish, cut rates or raise rates, their terms are going to be ending. And you're going to have a new president who's going to be appointing people that are going to cut rates. And then Chairman Powell's term is going to be ending in March of 2026. There's no way he's getting renewed. No way. Regardless of whether the president is Republican or Democrat, they're going to put in somebody that will continue to cut rates. That's it. And that Senate will gladly confirm them. And so to say that, well, the next, 3 or 4 years, we're going to have nothing but high interest rates, that's absolutely foolish. I would bet against anybody that we are going to have interest rates cut within the next 24 months. And I would win that bet hands down every time, because our country operates on cheap debt. And if you look at who pays for people to get into office, it's people with wealth and people that run these companies. They make more money off of cheap debt than they do expensive debt. So I think that's what you're going to see over the next couple of years.
And you're putting that on the record, so you have a lot of conviction in what you're saying.
Oh, I do, but I mean, it's not. The thing is, it's not. I mean, here's the thing: can I predict with certainty that if today is August 1st in St. Louis, that tomorrow it's not going to snow? Can I predict that with 99% certainty? Yeah, I'm not going to be 100% because almost nothing is 100%,
Yeah.
but I can predict that with 99% certainty based on what the new normal is at that time. Okay. When you look at the CPI, Consumer Price Index or something like that, when you look at how it's been trending downward over the last couple of years, the rise in interest rates is working. And it's eventually going to get to a point where consumers are squeezed enough and the Fed goes, okay, we've hit our 2% or we've hit something close to it. And, that could be a rolling recession that we're in or a sudden recession that we get into. But it will get to a point where people say, okay, we have to ease back. And if you look at the rise in interest rates or the cuts that have happened in interest rates over the last 30 years, and just look at the history of it, it follows the same trajectory, up and down, up and down. It's kind of like an expanding rubber band and a contrasting rubber band.
Mm-hmm.
Pull it too much, snap it back, pull it too much, that's how it works. And so I have absolute faith that rates are going to get cut. They're not staying over 7%, for a long period of time. I don't see that.
I agree with you, by the way, especially in the short term. I think that boa constrictor analogy was a great way to put it. I think in the apartment world or the commercial real estate world in general, we're going to see some distress as a result of rates remaining elevated for, let's call it 12 months or however long they're elevated for, and rising insurance costs, other increasing costs, and then perhaps some operators not being able to hit their pro forma rent projections. We've seen rent increases over the last few years that are probably unprecedented, but some folks were possibly, and I'm treading lightly here, were possibly projecting that out beyond just what we saw over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling a broker friend of mine this the other day, from 2020 to 2022, you had one of the greatest periods in the last 100 years of either securing loans from an interest rate perspective or refining. If you missed that window, that's on you. That's on you. And you might have bad luck where, you're stuck in a loan that you can't refi during that period of time and your term comes up at the end of this year in 2024, and that's part of the game, and some people win, some people lose, but we knew this was coming. All right. We knew that it wasn't sustainable. I mean, the interest rate that's on my house is at 1.875. That's free money. That's absolutely insane. And I knew as soon as they offered me that, I was like, sure, I'll take your free money. But I knew it wasn't sustainable. And so beginning in I remember this vividly. March of 2020, pandemic hits, and the Fed says, all right, we're cutting rates down to next to zero. I called up all my bankers, we had local bank debt, not institutional debt. And I said, I'd like to modify everything. And I want it to go out 7 years. And they said, sure. And so I locked into everything between 3.5% and 4% during that period of time. And then I went back to them again in January of 2022. And I said, I'd like to extend everything by another 2 years and I'll pay you 0.5 point. And they're like, sure, I'll do it again.
They probably loved that idea.
But the thing is that it wasn't hard to predict, because you just looked at our debt to GDP ratio at that time and it was through the roof. It wasn't sustainable. And all you have to do is look at, inflation that happened, rapid inflation that happened at the end of World War II. We had a debt to GDP ratio that was over 120%, one of the highest in our history. What happened right after that? You had massive inflation, So these things aren't necessarily hard to predict if you understand the season that you're in. You and I both know August 1st, when we walk outside, we can predict it's probably going to be hot outside in St. Louis. We know that. If it's January 1st in St. Louis, we know within reason it's probably going to be 55 degrees or below during that period of time. If you understand the season that you're in based on the history of being in that environment, it's not as hard to predict. Yeah, you're going to get Indian summer days every once in a while where you have 75 degrees on, Valentine's Day in St. Louis. It's incredibly rare. For the most part, it will fall hook, line, and sinker in terms of on February 14th in St. Louis, it will be below 55 degrees. And you can say that with about 99% certainty, okay? Just based on the history of looking at weather in St. Louis over the last 100 years. And you can do something very, very similar in just looking at the economic history of the United States since the inception of the Fed. Go back to World War II and go forward. And you can have a pretty good idea of where things are going to land.